Welcome everybody for our first Municipal Planning Commission meeting for January. It is the 15th and we're 30 seconds early. It's 4:59. I'm going to call it 5 p.m. for our start and call the meeting to order. You've had an opportunity to review the agenda. If we could have a motion accordingly. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. I will move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you. And then items from our December 4th meeting for the minutes. Every once in a while we try to. Actually, let's start doing that in every motion. My apologies. My apologies. With respect to the agenda, we're all good there. All those in favor? Appreciate that. Catching me early. And now for the minutes from December 4th. Anybody notice any irregularities or anything with them? Member Kent's.
I move to adopt the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Anyone else? All those in favor? Unanimously in favor. And so noted. We do have a development permit application, our sole application for a secondary suite. Item number 4 here, Senior Development Officer Dooley, could you get this item started? I believe that we've got a proponent here with us. Sir, if you would care to come up and have a seat up front. I'll help you to feel a little more involved in this process. Very good. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you and good evening, members of MPC. Item 4.1 is considering a secondary suite at 58 Mackenzie Crescent, which is zoned R1N, which is the residential detached narrow district. The proposed secondary suite is to be developed at 58 Mackenzie Crescent. Below, we have a table that shows some of the requirements under the land use bylaw for secondary suites. One of them being there should only be one suite on the subject parcel. This would be the first suite proposed on this parcel and the only suite being proposed at this time. The suite should occupy no more than 90% of the main floor area. The proposed secondary suite occupies 58.4% of the main floor area. 2 parking stalls are required for the main floor tenants and 1 stall is required for the suite tenants. And there are 3 parking stalls located in the rear of the subject parcel. The block itself can have 4 suites total, which equals 12% of the block. And the block currently has 0 suites. So this would be the first suite if approved on this block. Administration does support the application. Neighboring property consultations are required as per section 4.6 of the land use bylaw. There were 28 property owners notified within 60 meters of the subject site. And at the time of the writing of this report, 1 response was received. This slide details the response that was received. So the summarized feedback is that the subject parcel contravenes the Mackenzie Ranch Way control specifications regarding fencing. The alley is 7 meters wide with dumpsters, which makes it hard for passing vehicles. The application will set a precedent for other landowners to apply for secondary suites, increase traffic that the crowded neighborhood cannot handle. And the opposition is predominantly regarding the lack of backyard fencing, and adding a condition requiring a fence would negate the opposition. So in response, the city does not regulate private architectural controls, and the scope of the development authority pertains only to the land use bylaw and other city statutory documents. The 7-meter alley does meet the city's design guidelines for width of an alley. The minimum is 6 meters. All applications will be considered on their individual merit, so the suite would not set a precedent per se. And as it is the first on the block, and the block can accommodate up to 4 suites without any variances being required, an additional 3 would still meet the requirements of the land use bylaw on this specific block. And the land use bylaw does not require secondary suite developments to erect fencing. The secondary suite meets all regulations of the land use bylaw. It does not require any variances. And the applicant is proposing a 1-bedroom secondary suite to be located in the basement of the existing single detached dwelling. The aerial below does show where the proposed parking stalls will be in the rear yard. Administration has no concerns with the proposed application. The comments received in opposition pertain predominantly to fencing of the rear yard and compliance with the private architectural controls. The width of the alley meets the engineering design guidelines criteria, and an individual application does not guarantee approval or additional applications of a similar nature occurring within the area. Staff recommendation is that the Municipal Planning Commission approve the development permit for a secondary suite proposed to be constructed at 58 Mackenzie Crescent, Lot 54, Block 2, Plan 0725969, zoned R1N Residential Detached Narrow District, subject to the listed conditions. And the applicant is here this evening as well. Thank you.
Why something like this comes before MPC, given the reasoning for the opposition there, and that there are no variances involved. So just touch on that briefly for us.
Sure. So to the chair, the reason this application is being heard by the Municipal Planning Commission is because there was a letter of opposition received. So since the suite is a discretionary use, we do circulate to adjacent landowners within 60 meters of the subject site and give them 14 days to provide a response to administration. If opposition is received, we then refer to the Municipal Planning Commission for a decision rather than the development officer being the development authority on the application.
Thank you for outlining that. I just want people to understand and appreciate the fact that their concerns are taken seriously, not necessarily sold on this particular item, that the items put forward have merit. But I appreciate the way that they were addressed in the summary. So thank you for that. Member Gullickson.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. Just a quick question on the conditions. Condition 3, you have one on-site parking space in the front driveway. There is no front driveway on this.
Through the chair to Member Gullickson, my apologies. We should have that as one parking space in the rear yard. So maybe if we can have the motion to be as amended, if you guys want to proceed with approval, we can have that condition reflected in the minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll go ahead and I will make that motion that the Municipal Planning Commission approve the development permit for a secondary suite proposed to be constructed at 58 Mackenzie Crescent, Lot 54, Block 2, Plan 0725969, zoned R1N, Residential Detached Narrow District, subject to the following conditions as amended.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Can I make one other comment with that? Thank you. Yeah, and the fencing, we have no controls on that at all, right? I mean, whether we would like it or not, it doesn't matter on our side, correct?
Through the chair to Member Gullickson, correct. So under secondary suites, we don't have any regulations regarding it requiring to be fenced. So it's not a condition we could impose. It'd be easily appealable if we put something like that in the condition set.
Great, thank you.
Member Ross.
Thank you, Chair Creasy. No objection to this whatsoever. Just a curious question. When there's a new area being Mackenzie or Bruns or Henners or whatever the case may be, when the city takes over and there is development architectural controls, and obviously them controls then are not part of the planning and development process, because we've had situations like that come before the council. So when the city first takes it over, does all of the residents have to meet the original guidelines and architecture controls, or are they seem to be very vague, even with condominiums? So it's kind of.
So through the chair to Councillor or Member Ross, sorry. I might get on my soapbox here a little bit, so bear with me. When the city takes over infrastructure, that is typically at time of subdivision, where they've been granted what's called a final acceptance certificate. So that means all of the city infrastructure has been developed to a point where we are comfortable taking over maintenance of that infrastructure. So that's your utilities, your roads, alleys, the landscaping's been completed. At that time, full build out is usually not even anywhere close because the infrastructure needs to be there for development to occur. So a lot of the lots that we see will be bare. So they can't meet the architectural controls because there's just no development on it. You don't see developers proactively fencing in a lot of these lots, and it's not a requirement we have at time of subdivision either. So then when they go to get a development permit, our plans review, which is long past that point of taking over the infrastructure, is strictly to adhere to the land use bylaw or any other relevant statutory plans. The architectural controls are privately enforced. They're between the developer and any adjacent landowners. It's a civil matter. However, in some circumstances, when we see development permits come in, the developers proactively give us a stamp that show they've reviewed those drawings and it meets the requirements. It's not a must have, but we do see them sometimes as a nice to have that we can say we know that it meets those requirements. That is no reason for us to refuse a development permit if they don't meet those controls.
Thank you. That's good information for people that do have objections as well, because they have their point. They're went into community with certain standards and certain architectural controls, but that's a very gray area. So thank you.
Appreciate you bringing that up. I think there's some confusion there as to architectural controls being imposed by the municipality, in this case, the city of Lacombe. That's not the case. It's as much an item of marketing for the developer and trying to create a neighborhood with a certain style to it and not and well outside. We've got enough, quite frankly, we've got enough to look after from the municipal end of it without that as well. And that will be an interesting one for this individual to wrap their head around. That's not up to this body to enforce that.
Sorry, one additional comment to MPC. The only place the city has architectural controls, we call them design guidelines, are within the downtown area redevelopment plan. So those are aesthetic things we can enforce on because it's written right into our land use bylaw, just as that's one area where it does happen.
As I said earlier, we do have the proponent here, and your name, sir? Marvin. Attached to the resolution here, there was a few conditions. Have you had an opportunity to go over these conditions?
No.
No? The first one is a standard one. I don't know that we're going to have a lot of discussion on it. The second one, suggesting that the development permit is only for this lot and this lot only. The second one, all development must conform to conditions of the development permit and the approved plans required pursuant to this approval. Any revisions to the approved plans must be approved by the development authority. Therefore, you can't just go moving various items, especially parking, without on your own. It has to be as per plan, as is outlined on the next, and as well as the pathway. Is there any of the notes below that you'd like to highlight, staff? Nope. Very good. So I'm not seeing a lot of controversy in this item, to be perfectly honest with you, sir. Did you have anything that you would like to add at this time? Very good. Given that we have no more microphones lit up, I think that we can call the question. Does anyone need it reread? I wouldn't think so, but I hope not. Very good. With respect to the permit before us, all those in favor? I see none opposed. That is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. And good luck with your project, sir. You're a little suspicious, right? Item number 5, we have a summary of discretionary permits that have been issued. Hopefully it's a lengthy list.
It's one of our bigger ones we've had recently, actually, yes. So to members of the MPC, the first one we start off with is a garden suite with a 16% size variance. It's got the incorrect address there, actually, because it's not at, we just dealt with 58 Mackenzie Crescent. So we'll come back with an amended note on that at the next meeting for you guys. There's a 29% rear yard setback on an existing deck, which was at 14 Cameron Court. Variances over 15% can be approved by the development officer if no opposition or appeals were received. The permit was issued on December 12th as no opposition was received. There was also a fascia sign with height variance from grade at 5250 45th Street, so the Lacombe Mall. That's for a proposed restaurant. Variances over 15% and discretionary uses can be approved by the development officer if no opposition or appeals are received, and the permit was issued on January 1st, with the office being closed. It was January 2nd that it actually got out to the applicant. 7% rear yard setback variance for a dwelling and a 12% rear yard setback variance for a deck. Those were both existing at 38 Panorama Avenue. Variances under 15% can be approved by the development officer, and the permit was issued on December 11th of 2024. There was also a secondary suite at 5813 52nd Avenue. Discretionary use permits can be approved by the development officer if no opposition or appeals are received. None were, and the permit was issued on January 2nd, 2025. And then there was an office, which was previously a site-specific exception that went to City Council. That's at Unit 1, 7102 52nd Street. And it states that discretionary use permits can be approved by the development officer if no opposition or appeals are received. None were, and the permit was issued on December 11th, 2024. Thank you.
Thank you for that summary. Appreciate it. I was led to believe that as far as the new business opening at the mall, things are on schedule, and they believe they are anticipating an opening mid-February, if memory serves me correctly.
To the chair, I don't know if we actually were given a hard opening date, but they are working on their tenant improvements. I believe there's been some advertising for training of staff. So I think that sounds like a reasonable opening, and we haven't heard any concerns so far for the building permit side of things.
Wonderful. Member Kents.
Just back to the permits that have been approved. So on the first one, the garden suite with 16% size variance, isn't that over the size that you can approve?
Through the chair to member Kent. So variance is over 15% as long as we do a circulation and no comments or opposition is received. If it's under 15%, we don't have to do the initial circulation. We just send a decision letter and then they have a chance to appeal. So we did the initial circulation, no opposition, then it was approved subject to an appeal period, which passed, and then the permit was issued.
There's a way around that. Don't send out the circulation.
Yeah, when it's only a percentage point, it's kind of difficult, but you have to have a line somewhere. Yeah. Well. Mhm. Okay, the next meeting for MPC will be on February 5th. We have applications currently. I'm sorry, did I say January? I meant February 5th. Okay.
So to the chair, members of MPC, so today was the cutoff for applications. We haven't received any, so there's not going to be an MPC meeting. That leads me into a little bit of a segue. This evening is member Kent's last meeting on MPC. There will be a new new member coming in at the end of January. So I would like to thank member Kent's for his service on the committee. But in saying that, we have to do a full orientation for the new member. So tentatively, we are scheduling an orientation on the 5th. So you will see some notification about that. And again, thank you, member Kent's, for your input. Yeah.
Yes, we appreciate it. Many of the boards and commissions and organizations we have in the city rely on volunteers, and when they come with good ideas and conduct themselves in a manner that is helpful, it's greatly appreciated, and we thank you for your service here. Does anyone have anything?
Orientation on it. Now.
That's the third time.
I know, you're orientated or.
Think that is, yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, you got me there.
I was gonna say there'll have to be some sort of enticement.
Yeah.
Well, a relatively late meeting, especially for a final one from one member. It's 5:19.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by member Ross. All those in favor? Thanks, everyone.